Answers. We don't need no stinking answers. Okay, maybe just for tonight. Welcome to Talk Gnosis for November 13, 2013. I'm Bishop Kenneth Canterbury, and as always, I'm being joined by my lovely co-host, Bishop Laney Peterson. Hello, Bishop.
Hello, Bishop. How are you tonight?
I'm doing very, very well. We should have a pretty fun and interesting show tonight.
Yes, we shall.
Because tonight we get to answer viewer questions. And I think we've got some pretty good ones that's been put on our plate for us tonight. You want to go ahead and we'll jump right into this and take the first question?
Okay, the first question we have is from Joseph Payne from the Google Plus Gnostics community, and he asks, regarding my kids, how do I teach them about Gnosticism? What do other Gnostic parents do?
I think that's a good question.
And Ken, you have a lovely daughter, so what did you do?
Well, I mean, for me, probably my approach is a little bit different than most Gnostic parents. That my daughter was around from the time I was a priest all the way till I became a bishop, and so my daughter came to Mass with us on a regular basis. She sat around and was involved with a lot of Gnostic study groups, whether they were at my house. So even if it was casual, you know, she's popping in and out of the room. You know, she's hearing a lot of the things that are going on. You know, to me, though, what I would tell any parent, it's really probably no different than those of any standard form of religion, whether it's, you know, mainstream Christianity, you know, is that they could, for an example, you know, take a particular verse out of the Gospel of Philip, Gospel of Thomas, or various other Gnostic ideas, read it, and maybe just have simple discussions with their children.
Yeah. You know, one thing that I was thinking about, you know, I don't know what this individual's situation is, if he has a community, if there are other parents there. You know, it may be a good idea for him and the parents to get together and approach any clergy that they have and say, hey, we want to get a children's program together and work on it. The other thing is we've often talked on this show about having a practice, a daily practice. Well, what about involving the child in the practice? Children many times will like ritual, incense, candles. Is there a family altar? This would be a way to introduce the child to spiritual practice and to the ideas, the family's religious beliefs, in a very non-threatening and simple way. So that would be what I would advise is, you know, work within the community, but also really strengthen your own personal practice and include the child in that.
And I agree with you. That's great. In fact, it's interesting you brought that up, is that one of our good friends, I've known him for a long time, Bishop Danny Garvin out of Evansville. We were talking briefly yesterday, and Danny was telling me about his granddaughter, who's just 10 years old, and she's so active in his church. She lights the candles. She dresses up in her little alb. She holds liturgy for him. She turns the pages for him. He even has her sometimes read the Gospels. And, you know, it kind of came up in discussion, you know, how young is too young to even get them involved into something like minor orders, you know, and in essence, well, she's already kind of participating as a porter or a lector, you know. And, you know, so I find it, you know, really kind of endearing when you've got children who actively want to participate.
Absolutely.
And I guess, you know, my answer to any parent is that if you've got a child who wants to actively participate, don't discourage it. Don't send them out to their room. Don't say this is for adults. You know, kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for many times. And many times, you know, out of the mouth of babes, sometimes you may get some really great questions, which makes you kind of reflect yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I agree with you, and I think that we should definitely encourage children's spiritual interest, and I think we need to not patronize them. If they want to participate in this, by all means, you know, we need to encourage that. So that would be my advice, and it sounds like it's your advice as well, Bishop Ken.
Absolutely. Well, I guess I'll take the next question here. Is Jesse Corrales from the Google Plus Gnostic community. had asked, I don't know how to properly explain what a Gnostic is. How do you handle situations like this?
Well, I can tell you from myself, and this is purely the way I handle it. The problem is that the word Gnostic has a lot. It's a very loaded word. Okay, first
Mm-hmm.
of all, some people get completely mixed up and think that the person is saying that they're an agnostic,
Correct.
which is somebody who is unsure about the nature of deity. And so that creates its own set of problems. And then the other problem is that Gnostic has become so loaded within the Christian community, both on the conservative side as well as the liberal progressive side.
Mm-hmm.
Conservatives might use the term Gnostic is a substitute for heresy.
Mm-hmm.
And liberals and progressive Christians will sometimes use Gnostic to describe any form of dualism or what they perceive of as a body or sexuality hatred. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a huge problem there. And the fact is that Gnostic is being used in modern Gnostic communities very differently in many cases. So I would say one of two things. One would be to avoid the use of the term. I say I'm an esoteric Christian, and I kind of leave it at that. The other one is just to get specific. I'm a Valentinian Gnostic. I'm a Jonite Gnostic,
Right.
and that opens up for opens things up for some discussion and definition rather than automatically alienating or confusing the questioner.
Mm-hmm. And I think those are all valid answers. I mean, many times I will use the same term, esoteric Christian. A lot of that goes from Jean Bricot and kind of his catechism for the Gnostic Church and the esoteric Christian doctrine. And many times I will specifically, coming from a tradition of apostolic Gnosis, I will say that I am a Christian Gnostic. So I will be very specific. I am a Christian Gnostic. And that sometimes then will have people enter into a dialogue. Well, what do you mean by a Christian Gnostic? And then we can sort of then open up the door about Gnosis and Gnosticism.
Absolutely.
But there tends to be a lot of confusion. Sometimes people do hear when you say Gnostic, they're clicking agnostic.
Yeah. And it just muddles the conversation.
Absolutely. So that, I think, was a very good question. The next one was submitted to us by a Father John on my own Facebook page, which would be, what would be considered a valid neo-Gnosis thought or philosophy?
Gosh, it's a pretty
big question.
Because there's a bunch of different neo-Gnostic groups and traditions out there who, some of them might fancy themselves dualist, others may be very materialist. I consider myself actually to be pretty darn materialist in my way of thinking and approaching the world. What about you, Bishop Ken?
Well, for me, what would be considered valid? Well, I guess I'm a little opinionated, so let me give our typical disclaimer. The opinions on the show are our opinions. It doesn't represent anyone else. But for me, coming from the French Gnostic tradition my whole entire life, I view valid Gnosis as kind of the expressions put forth by the apostolic Gnostic churches. And the apostolic Gnostic churches have always kind of been hand in hand with traditions of esoteric and initiatory societies, primarily that of high degree Freemasonry and Martinism, along with very kind of specific esoteric doctrines and esoteric Christian doctrines, and with teachings that have been really kind of linked to both, in many ways, to the Gospel of John, to the teachings and the Gospels within the Nag Hammadi library, and to a certain degree also the teachings and writings within the Corpus Hermeticum. For me, I'm sometimes breaking hairs on this one, but I do put a distinction between Gnosis and Gnosticism. And, for me, a valid Gnostic church coming from apostolic Gnosis is a church that has all of the sacraments and all of the sacramental teachings that is true to that apostolic tradition.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, what would you say about a non-apostolic Gnostic church? I mean, or an organization that seeks to develop spiritual insight but does not operate within, let's say, the Christian apostolic tradition?
Well, I'm pretty opinionated on things. So let me make that clear. I'm pretty opinionated on things. One of my problems is that, and you kind of stated in this a little bit earlier, but, many people want to label everything as being Gnostic. And if we label everything as Gnostic, we're kind of weakening the waters, if you will. I mean, if everything's Gnostic, then nothing's Gnostic, because we can't call everything that's Gnostic. I mean, I've seen all sorts of ideas, from Luciferian ideas to Thelemic ideas, to all sorts of other ideas kind of being expressed as Gnostic. While I would say that any of those ideas can lead one to personal Gnosis, I would make a clean distinction between that and kind of Gnostic thought.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm going to move on to, we're running low on time here, so I'm going to move on. This is an interesting question. The discussion of death is largely avoided in modern post-Restoration Gnosticism, understanding that there may be a variety of opinions on the matter, even in individual communities. What are the host views on eschatology, in particular that of what happens after death?
Ooh, that's a tough one and a very good one.
Yeah.
I think a lot really depends, again, if one is kind of from apostolic Gnosis or other schools of Gnostic thought. I think there are many Gnostics within even apostolic Gnosis who kind of believe in kind of this concept of reincarnation. But I think kind of a universal theme of many within the apostolic Gnostic traditions, who kind of came forth from the French Gnostic traditions, is really kind of that Martinist concept of reintegration, of becoming one with the pleroma, one with the fullness. And I think that is really kind of the ultimate goal of all Gnostics, is to be broken from that chain of reincarnation back into this world, and to be reunited with the fullness. So, for me personally, the ultimate goal is, again, breaking that chain and being reunited back into the fullness. But one also accepts that one may be brought back forth into this earth and be reborn, to kind of learn lessons that we haven't learned from our past lives.
Yeah, I've never died before, so I can't actually say for certain. I tend to believe that reincarnation may well be possible. I believe that there is a purpose behind creation, behind the universe, behind all that there is, that has very little to do with my own little human agenda. So I believe that in some cases, I believe that on this time on Earth, we can build up our souls to the point where there may be the possibility of conscious decision making after death. There may be a process of reincarnation that is involuntary. We may just return to the earth and serve as food for other life forms, and eventually once again participating in the story and the cycles of creation. But ultimately we know that this earth is going to pass away. Our sun's going to burn out, and everything that we've built on this planet is going to crumble and fall. But yet the universe is going to continue expanding. The other planets are going to continue spinning. And as you might point out, the reintegration, our place in that may be something that's well beyond what we are actually going to be conscious of.
I think that's a very good answer. One more quick question, if we can get it in here, is that this one came from Fred or Johan, who asked, many Gnostic churches claim no dogma. What does this mean?
I think that that these are people. I don't know, and I don't want to make any statements or judgments. I think sometimes there's kind of a conceit where we want to be open and progressive and say we have no dogma, except the fact that we have no dogma. That becomes our dogma.
Right.
And I think that there are certainly churches that respect the notion of what Baptists would call soul liberty. The idea that people ought to be free from external pressures and government intervention to be free to choose their spiritual path. But I think that when we are talking about a church or a congregation, there's usually going to be something there, even if it's not written down. There's going to be something there that's bringing these folks together. And if there isn't, that the organization isn't going to last too long.
Right. Usually, or I should say usually, sometimes I can get into kind of this argument of splitting hairs between dogma and doctrine. And, I usually like to say, we have doctrines. And, a lot of that comes from, I guess, from the language is that, dogma, comes from the Greek, which usually kind of be interpreted as seems to one or an opinion or a belief, where doctrine comes from a Latin word, which kind of means teachings. Again, coming from the French Gnostic traditions and apostolic Gnosis, for us, our doctrines, our teachings are based upon the teachings that have been put forth from our own church fathers, and basically the synod of bishops who have agreed to those teachings. And then those who have come before who have taken, let's say, like the Catechism of Jean Bricaud, and they've added to it bishops like Stephen Haller, who has done a good job of expanding kind of his ideas upon on Christian Gnosis. But I think these are all doctrines that help to unify us. As I try to explain sometimes to my students, this gives us a common language in which to be able to communicate ideas. So for us to be able to share doctrines, we're sharing a language, and we're also helping to strengthen our particular egregore and our current by staying true to our own particular traditions. So, that's the way I kind of usually answer that question. We could go probably on any of these topics for a complete show.
We could.
And I really appreciate all the questions that the viewers gave us. Lainey, you got some news that you want to mention.
Yes, well, it's actually about your own church.
I know, but I figured I didn't want to toot our own horns, so I'll give it to you.
Well, Todd Jacobus has been incarnated into the Oriental Apostolic Church of Damkar? I'm sorry,
Yes.
Bishop Ken. Okay.
Yes.
Congratulations to Todd Jacobus, who I know to be just a really excellent man.
Yeah.
I'm very happy for you. I'm very happy for him. And I'm very happy for all of us that this association has taken place. So congratulations to all.
Yes, I think Todd Jacobus is a great addition to our church.
Absolutely.
He's up there in Canada, so for all of our brothers up in the Great White North, we've got a new archbishop up there now. He has lots of years of dedication, not only to the Gnostic traditions, but also to martial arts, which says a lot about his character and the type of person he is.
Absolutely.
So very much welcome.
Yes.
Again, I want to ask everybody for their feedback on all forms of our social media. Make sure that you look us up on the Google Plus Gnostic communities, that you check out Talk Gnosis on Facebook. You can also always email your comments to talkgnosis@gnosticnyc.com. Also, you can leave comments for us on YouTube, as well as our own personal pages. If we can't answer you directly, shows like this, I can see us doing many of these in the future.
Absolutely.
But we've got to get the comments from you guys to be able to do shows like this. And we do appreciate the ones that we got for this show.
Sure. And as always, this has been a production of the Gnostic NYC Network. If you did enjoy our show, please share it with your friends, click the like button, and subscribe to our channel. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the views of Gnostic NYC or any other organization. No animals were harmed during the production of this show. And for more Talk Gnosis, tune in every Wednesday night for new episodes. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Good.